Hey guys, I'm filling in for Tim Pool again this morning. We've got a lot of news coming up. A lot of it has to do with Ukraine. So we're going to get started and then we're going to give you an interview that Tim conducted with Sebastian Gorka that I can't wait to see myself. So let's just jump right into it. Overnight, Moscow bombed Kiev, killing at least 9 people, injuring dozens more. Peace talks are definitely on the rocks. We have this story up from Human Events. At least 42 people were hospitalized, including 6 children, according to the Kiev City Military Administration. And as I was looking at this morning, people were still being pulled from the rubble. So the death toll is probably not yet known. Air raid sirens howled on Thursday night, warning citizens of the Russian strike that is also believed to have injured dozens. Ukraine has been subjected to many Russian strikes since 2022, which, as we know, is when that's when Putin invaded Ukraine, right there under Biden's watch. And they've just been going this whole time. Trump spoke about this himself on Truth Social. He said, "I am not happy with the Russian strikes on Kiev. Not necessary and very bad timing. Vladimir, stop. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done." You've probably been following this peace deal. It has been very rocky. There's been a lot of back and forth. And then recently there were supposed to be some talks in London. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, pulled out of those talks. Other Trump administration officials pulled out. Europe doesn't like what's going on. We've seen France talking about how they're going to send troops to Ukraine. That was a little while ago. And yeah, Trump is really not happy with Zelenskyy. He believes that a lot of what's going on here is that Russia has the power and the control over this situation. And he put out a Truth Social post yesterday, as well as spoke in the White House from the Oval Office about it while he was signing executive orders, a lot of which took aim at the university system in the United States. And he said, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is boasting on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that Ukraine will not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. There's nothing to talk about here. Now, that's something that Zelenskyy has said since the initial invasion in 2022, but it's important to realize that Russia invaded Crimea actually in 2014. And Trump knows that, of course. And he said this statement is very harmful to peace negotiations with Russia in that Crimea was lost years ago under the auspices of President Barack Hussein Obama and is not even a point of discussion. Nobody is asking Zelenskyy to recognize Crimea as Russian territory, but if he wants Crimea, why didn't they fight for it 11 years ago when it was handed over to Russia without a shot being fired? There are also houses for many years before the Obama handover, major Russian submarine bases. It's inflammatory statements like Zelenskyy's that makes it so difficult to settle this war. He has nothing to boast about. And this is really the key part. He says the situation for Ukraine is dire. He can have peace or he can fight for another 3 years before losing the whole country. I have nothing to do with Russia, but have much to do with wanting to save, on average, 5,000 Russian and Ukrainian soldiers a week who are dying for no reason whatsoever. The statement made by Zelenskyy today will do nothing but prolong the killing field, and nobody wants that. We are very close to a deal, but the man with no cards to play should now finally get it done. I look forward to being able to help Ukraine. So this has been Trump's position all along. This is a guy who looks at a situation, says who's in power, who has the most to lose, who has the most to gain, who has the power position. And he looks at this situation and he says, well, you know, Russia has the most power in this situation. They're the invaders. Sure, they did. That's a wrong thing to do, obviously. But they're the ones who have most of the might in this situation. Ukraine doesn't have much without the backing of the U.S. and Europe. And as we know, Trump has been very vocal about the lack of European support for Ukraine's offensive. Europe seems to think that this is entirely America's responsibility. And in fact, there was a report from the Daily Mail about about Trump's scathing attack on Zelenskyy, which it certainly is, and a warning to the wartime leader to back his peace deal and forfeit land to Putin. And there was one part that I found really interesting in this that I just wanted to share with you amid all of the conversation. And that is that one minister told the Daily Mail, the U.S. are effing up everything on Ukraine, on tariffs, on everything. And then a former defense secretary, Sir Ben Wallace, told the Daily Mail, the next war will happen not because of Ukraine's actions, but because of Donald Trump and his redneck team of Walter Middies, media pundits, and real estate salesmen who fail to understand the world we live in. Every point on Trump's latest deal strengthens the Kremlin and weakens the West. Every point emboldens Iran and China. The consequences for ordinary Americans is great, says this defense secretary, former defense secretary. If Trump continues this way, the great country of the United States will find itself isolated, friendless, and broke. So that's the European perspective on this. And I think they don't quite understand that Americans don't want this war. Americans are not interested in perpetuating this. That was evidenced by the election of Donald Trump. And something that Marco Rubio said about it, he spoke about this on Barry Weiss's Honestly podcast this week, saying there is no military solution to this war. We have to be frank. He said that it's key to figure out, are these guys even in the same neighborhood? Because if they're in completely different zip codes, then we may have to conclude that they're so far apart that peace is impossible. At this time, we've done our best. We put a lot of time and energy at the highest levels of our government. We'll continue to be willing to do so as long as there's a realistic path forward. If at some point we determine that we're just too far apart and not enough movement is happening, we may need to move on to other priorities because there are a lot of important things happening in the world. This is not our war. We didn't start this war. We're trying to help everybody end it, but they may be too far apart, but I hope not. That's what Rubio said, and that echoes what Vice President J.D. Vance said, saying that if peace isn't possible at this time, the U.S. is going to move on. I don't know what it looks like to have the U.S. move on. I don't think Ukraine knows what that looks like. And Ukraine, by not agreeing to this peace deal, which we haven't seen publicly, but has, portions of it have been leaked to, other people. The idea is, let's see. The U.S. brokered peace deal would recognize Russian ownership of Crimea, territory they gained during the 2014 invasion, freeze the current line of aggression, which I think would allow Ukraine control over the Donetsk region, and forbid Ukraine from ever joining NATO. So I don't know if they can really get to that. Marco Rubio slammed a report out from Politico that said White House debates lifting sanctions on Russian energy assets and Nord Stream. And Marco Rubio said, this is unequivocally false. Neither Steve Witkoff, who's a presidential envoy, nor I have had any conversations about lifting sanctions against Russia as part of the deal. And he calls it journalistic malpractice. So I think we don't really know yet what's going on. But, we're definitely going to find out. I'd like to thank Stephen Crowder for sending viewers our way. And also, you're going to really enjoy this interview that Tim did with Sebastian Gorka, who is Trump's director of counterterrorism. And I'll be back with you at the end of that.
I suppose I would refer to you as deputy or DAP. How would I refer to you as your title?
It's funny, when it was announced by the president that I'm coming back, everybody said, so you got 2 jobs, right? 2 paychecks. And no. It's a little esoteric, little Byzantine in the White House. You have a rank as a civilian, and then you have a job title. So the rank, there's 3 senior ranks in the White House. I'm the second highest deputy assistant to the president. That's a DAP, that's the rank. And then the actual job is senior director for counterterrorism in the National Security Council. So it's a long business card. It's a very long business card.
So there's a lot of classified stuff then.
Oh, I live in a SCIF. I'm in a SCIF 12 hours, a secure compartmented information facility, 12 hours a day. I come out to see what the president did on my phone, when I grab coffee, but the rest of the time I'm in a secure facility.
All right, so I can't ask you about classified stuff,
yeah.
But does it the things you learn about the threats we're facing, both from groups like MS-13, the narco gangs, but also foreign actors.
Totally.
I was speaking with Secretary Noem, and one of the issues that came up is that during the Biden administration, with the border being as open as it was, it's not just narco gangs that come through. It is, she mentioned someone from India. There's fears of Iranians. There's fears of ISIS and other affiliated groups. So does it make your spine tingle when you're going through this information about the threats we face?
So let's do the red teaming exercise. So the U.S. military has a function. It's actually an officer who sits next to a local commander who does the red teaming, meaning you think like the enemy. So if you're in Pacific Command, you're thinking like China. If you're in CENTCOM, you're thinking like Al-Qaeda or ISIS. So let's pretend we're the bad guys, okay? You're a leader of a cartel. I'm a commander in the IRGC in Iran or ISIS. And you hear that Biden and Kamala have literally opened the border. They've just rung the bell. There is no border control. You can download a taxpayer-funded app called CBP One, where you pre-clear yourself. You say, my name is Mickey Mouse. I'm a refugee from X, Y, and Z. And you get a registration number as a, quote, asylum seeker. You clear yourself, not the intelligence community. Yeah. You cross the border and say, hey, I'm John Smith. I'm a refugee. And CBP, Customs and Border Protection, have been ordered not to vet you, not to hold you and check you, but to give you, a bag of, baby diapers, buy you a plane ticket to whichever city you want to go to, give you a phone on the taxpayer dime, and wave you into the country. So if you're Iran, if you're China, if you're MS-13, what are you going to do when you know the border doesn't exist? You're going to flood that stream, and just do the math, okay? I asked Stephen Miller on my show before I came in about a year and a half ago, because Stephen Miller is literally the man, the mastermind behind the president's first immigration policy, and now as Homeland Security Advisor, he's the guy who's affecting the deportations and everything else. And I asked Stephen live on air, I said, so Stephen, we hear this 12 million illegals in America. We've heard that for about 30 years from this famous Yale study. And I said, Stephen, it can't be static. You can't have the same number of illegals for over a generation. So I said, so how many illegals do we have in America after the Biden administration? And he said, well, I've done the math. The Biden administration has probably let another 12 million in. So we're probably at about 30 or 40 million illegals. Now, if 1% of them, just 1%, are terrorists, narco traffickers, human traffickers, drug smugglers, you're talking about divisional-sized assets. So when the president said, this is an invasion, and we're going to use the Enemy Alien Act, he is utterly, totally justified.
Let's say 0.1%. You're still talking
Totally.
about 40,000 people.
Massive.
Yeah.
And if you're China, you're thinking, oh, no border control?
And
send my guys in.
We've got videos of Chinese nationals
Oh
coming
my gosh,
the border.
Yeah, 30 of them standing there, all from... I had Todd Benjamin. Todd Benjamin is one of the best private sector immigration specialists, worked for the Texas state, and he's at the Center for Immigration Studies. Again, I'm just using anecdotes from my past life. I had him on my show to talk about immigration, and he's in a bed and breakfast, or rather a decent hotel in northern Mexico. And he says to me in the break, he said, I just need to tell you, I'm in this rather nice hotel in northern Mexico, covering the influx. The whole building is full of Chinese immigrants. Not, Nicaraguan, El Salvador, Mexico. Chinese nationals making their way into America under the Biden administration.
Rep. Riley Moore has this bill he's proposing that would strip the student visas of upwards of 300,000 Chinese national students. The fear being that they're a national security threat. I mean, this is our intellectual property. Our university is going to be. Do you agree that's a threat? Do you think we should be stripping these students of their visas?
The fact is, whether or not they are willing assets of the CCP, or whether they are coerced, doesn't make a difference. If you're a Chinese national and you are permitted to come from the world's biggest communist dictatorship to the United States, what do you think the government back home is going to do to you?
We actually know this from Lily Tang Williams.
Yeah.
If you've met her, she said that you swear an oath. That you basically say, I will come back and I will bring this with me.
Right. Well, you have to.
Yeah.
You must. Otherwise,
they're
not let out.
They don't let you go. Yeah.
Right. Bingo. So, yeah, and the fact that we have foreign nationals working at some of our most sensitive defense research labs is unconscionable, and is also a function of decades of people who hate America running the country.
There was a story that I think it may have occurred during Trump's first term, but it was Chinese nationals caught with viruses at airports.
How about this? We in the first administration, we worked diligently to declassify certain local cases to demonstrate to the world. I mean, look, I'm a counterterrorism guy, but I understand the number one strategic threat to America is still China. There's a reason we declassified a local case out in Iowa or somewhere out west where a Chinese national was found stealing corn from a cornfield. Why?
Genetic engineering?
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. Taking
Wow.
samples of what we had created to make our crops blight resistant, stealing those samples to take them back to China. So this isn't just about World War III, the invasion of Taiwan, cyberspace. It's about food. It's about everything. I mean, look, you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to have TSSCI clearances like I do. Read what the Chinese say. They've written a book in 1999 called Unrestricted Warfare by two senior PLA colonels, where they give you the guidebook. You can read it in English, unclassified online, where they tell you, we know how to take down a more powerful nation like America. You add that to the One Belt, One Road initiative, and also the declared intent of Beijing by the 100th anniversary of the revolution in 2048 to become the only hegemonic power in the world. Every other country will be a satrapy or a tributary nation or defeated. This isn't classified. This is their documentation.
When, I believe the story was with Michael Flynn, I could be wrong, but when the Trump administration at first, back in 2017, coming in, expressed that their concerns was not Russia, but China, we immediately saw this backlash from the establishment political classes saying, no, you're wrong, stop.
Yeah.
Are they beholden to China? Do they like China? Why was the narrative shifted in such a way?
Well, there's a couple of answers to that. And the first is, and God bless the president, because when I came in, I was a CT guy, and I thought I was going to do counterterrorism 9 years ago. Then when you come in, you read the president's daily intelligence briefing, you realize we're going to deal with ISIS, we're going to deal with Russia, we're going to deal with North Korea, we're even going to deal with Iran. The one strategic level threat we face is China. Now, why did America's elite get into bed with China? So many factors. Number one, Kissinger, who I'm not a big fan of, had this idea that, you know what, if we split Red China away from the Soviet Union, we'll win the Cold War. And then he sent Nixon to China. I mean, the most hawkish, anti-communist former senator, then vice president, then you send him to China, and then you open the floodgates. And then you normalize relations under the Bush administration later on. You give it most favored nation status. And then Silicon Valley, the Chamber of Commerce, big industry say, you know what? Labor's really cheap in China. We don't need those jobs in Ohio. We don't need those jobs here. It's all about marginal profit. Let's outsource everything. Read J.D. Vance's book, written when he wasn't a supporter of the president. If you want to, I mean, look, you know why. But if you want to understand why a billionaire real estate mogul, reality TV star from Manhattan is elected by working class Americans, you've got to read Hillbilly Elegy. Because in it, J.D., chapter and verse, how his family, a working class family, was destroyed by both parties, by the left and the right, who said, we don't need jobs, we don't need steel workers in America, we don't need to manufacture stuff, we can outsource it all. And President Trump said, that's wrong. The power of a nation is based upon what it can build for itself. It's a national security issue that we don't make steel in America, let alone antibiotics. The fact that more than 90% of our antibiotics come from China, where the COVID virus came from, is a national security threat. So, you know, why did they do it? Business reasons, short-sighted business reasons, basically a hatred of the American working class. And then for the really smart PhDs in the think tanks in this city, they said, oh, if you liberalize economically with a nation, they will politically liberalize. This asinine, childish logic that if you allow China to trade with America, suddenly they'll become Jeffersonian Democrats. I mean, just utter moronic, childish, sophomoric analysis, because we liberalized, and then what happens? Tiananmen Square. That's what happened. Social engineering, credit scores, welding people into their homes under COVID. That's how much China liberalized.
You know, it's funny because we hear a lot from people that they're buying up farmland, they're buying up land near military bases.
Yep.
And my response is, when you don't produce things, but you keep buying from somebody, what value of exchange do you have? Like, so we give dollars to China when we buy their product. What can they buy from us but our hard assets, which is our land, our infrastructure? And the terrifying reality is that if this doesn't stop, and I do believe it will with the Trump administration.
Oh, yes.
If it doesn't, Gen Z they'll have Chinese landlords. They will, and I don't mean.
And you will own a nothing.
Indeed.
And you will hate it, and you won't be happy, right?
The farms will be leased to the CCP aligned groups. They will already Gen Z is struggling to buy property and have a family. They're not having kids.
Right.
And if they ever do get to that point, they're going to find an apartment to live in, and their landlord will be a company run by Chinese nationals.
Bingo. You nailed it. Let me give you the good news.
All right,
the good news is the tariff situation.
I love
the
it.
president just level sets the world. I mean, think about how people can be cool with. Think about. I'll give you a couple of metrics. Well, you know, Canada, 200% to 300% tariff on U.S. dairy goods.
Yeah, and peanut butter too, right?
They're supposed to be our NATO ally. Japan, okay, Japan that we rebuilt, that we brought into the community of decent nations after World War II. 700% tariff on U.S. rice. Right, and we're supposed to be helping you out?
And they're importing from China too, aren't they?
Right. And here's the good news, though. So number one, what the president's doing with tariffs. Number two, a colleague of mine from the first Trump administration who spent 4 years in prison, to quote him at the RNC convention, "I went to prison so you wouldn't have to." Peter Navarro is back in his office in this building as the China policy maven for the president.
Not 4 years.
No, 4 months.
4 months.
4 months in prison, right?
Right.
And the guy who, has a record, he was pardoned, of course, afterwards.
Yeah.
He is back in this building. That tells you that we're good on China.
I mean, why did Bannon and Navarro go to prison and Merrick Garland not?
Well, that is the question. But we're only 90 odd days in, so just relax.
I can
Patience.
hear Bannon's getting excited.
Well, look, when you've got people like Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi, when you look at the second tier of individuals in the DOJ. Just go down from the AG. Oh, you mean the attorneys who were in the courtroom representing I was in the courtroom as a guest of the president's. His attorneys who were fighting, Alvin Bragg, the corrupt judges in New York. Oh, one of them is now the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. Harmeet Dillon is the head of the most insidious nest of vipers in the DOJ, which is the Civil Rights Division, that really was used to attack the civil rights of American patriots under Biden.
Yeah.
And now Harmeet Dillon, this warrior princess from California, is the chief of that division. Guys, relax. Just take a breath. Count to 10.
I'm actually feeling good.
Yeah.
I do see a lot of people that are upset over the Epstein files.
Of course, but it kind of boggles my mind.
I agree.
It's like, can you just wait a second? We've been here for less than 3 months.
I'm surprised that there are people.
Where are the arrests? Can you just hang on a second? We don't behave like them. We don't send agents to Mar-a-Lago. We're not sending agents to Kalorama, to Obama's mansion, like they did. We believe in justice. We investigate. We get the facts. Then we take action.
I was surprised that people were expressing this because I said, do you really think Dan Bongino, of all people, after his entire career, everything he knows and has talked about would simply be like, I'm going to take a low, compared to his nation's biggest show. No, I'm going to do a public service job, low 6 figures, put my feet up and not get the job done. It seems absurd to me.
Kash Patel, a guy who was a victim of the deep state, who was illegally surveilled as Devin Nunes' investigator on Congress. He's the guy who's going to do the big cover-up. Guys, come on.
Yeah, no.
I'm glad you get it.
Well, I mean, we've had conversations with Kash Patel on my show, and he was always very honest with us, and I respected it. For instance, we were having a conversation. One of my friends, Luke, who's very libertarian, said, "Pardon Julian Assange," and Kash gave I don't know if that's the right answer. Cash wasn't about to just blow smoke up, blow smoke, let's say that, to pander to us. He said, here's what I actually think.
Yeah.
And so when he was he was explaining what do you want to do, why you want to do it, I said, he's not some, there are a lot of people that are Trump supporters who say, abolish the FBI, just get rid of everybody. And Cash was actually much more moderate, saying, no, return them to law enforcement, weed out the corruption.
Bingo.
And I said, he's not telling you what you want to hear, he's telling you what he's going to do, and it is a good thing.
What Cash does isn't for clicks.
Right.
Right? It's not about clicks. It's about belief. That guy is a patriot. As is Dan. As you said, Dan Bongino, I can't even estimate the amount of money Dan walked away from. And I was bugging him every day on Twitter saying, Dan, come on, we're waiting for you. I know you didn't get the Secret Service, but we're waiting for you.
Well, after he got asked, or before he got asked, you're texting him saying...
No. On social media, I'm giving him a little prod. Dan, I know you want the Secret Service, but Dan, come on.
What a thing to walk away from.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
and he was on the cusp of, I don't want to give anything away, but he was building something, right?
Yeah.
And then he says, okay, nope, I'm walking away. It's big.
And I stress this to people because, look, I run a company, we've got a lot of employees. I have a general idea of the amount of money he's walking away from to do a public sector job.
Double it. Double it, dude.
Oh yeah. When you're pulling in 170,000 concurrent viewers, it's the #1 live stream in the country every day.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm going to go leave the spotlight, leave the limelight, not be able to give as much press ever, to do the right thing for this country, and the salary estimates are around like 180,000 a year for the job.
Yeah. That's correct.
That is the epitome of honor, in my opinion. I've said there's.
Can you tell that to my wife?
Oh, she doesn't agree, or what?
No, because I took a bit of a
you did similarly.
Yeah.
Well, much respect to you as well. I've said knowing about the industry behind the scenes, the amount of money you make, and the responsibility to the influence that you wield, to walk away from it all, to do this job takes tremendous courage. To walk away from that, people need to understand how hard it is to abandon your castle that you are building. And it's not just about living in your luxury. It's about, I have built this thing that I believe really can change the country, but you have been called upon for public duty, and you do that.
Right.
And so I say there's very few people, if I've ever looked up to, I look up to Dan Bongino for that move. And to you as well, for walking away from these powerful media positions where you can sell sponsorships, put your feet up, get an infinity pool, and instead, I'm going to go into the trenches and try and fight the deep state.
Yeah.
So that's my next question to you. Christy Nome says to me, the deep state is real, and I can't believe it. Are you concerned? I mean, saying on camera, sitting here, talking about your intentions to go after these nefarious actors? Or, I mean, have they been routed? And
Oh, not at all. Not at all. We've only just begun. We've only just
they
begun.
might win?
No. But I want everyone to understand that the next 18 months is the window. The next 18 months is the window.
Is this a shot across the bow? I mean, you're giving them a warning, but they know this.
Oh, they know this.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what they're doing. Look, the good news is that we've kind of broken them spiritually at the Grundun level. I mean, I was here on January the 21st, 2017, the day after the inauguration, because I was a deputy assistant to the president back then. And I don't drink. So after the inauguration ball, I wasn't hungover. And I said, it may be a Saturday, but I'm going to work. The building was empty, but I came here, got my badge, picked my office. And I had to leave this building 8 years ago during the Pink Pussy Hat riot. Do you remember that?
I was there.
Okay. Yeah. So, but do you remember what Mayor Bowser did? Mayor Bowser gave them access to the whole block around the White House. It was just 40 people deep around the whole White House. And I had to drive out of the White House. And I thought after this victory, it's going to be worse than that.
Yeah.
It's going to be Antifa on steroids. Nothing. We've broken them, except for the judges. What's happening in the courts with regards to deportations and everything else. So they haven't given up, and the window is the next 18 months.
I do think that it's not so, when you say you've broken them in regards to the protest, I actually think you've awakened. A lot of these people that were on the ground, that were angry, had a hard wake-up call with failed immigration policies, with the failed economics.
Hope so.
Well, that's how Trump ended up winning the popular vote.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that he won. So he won more votes than he did 4 years ago by 4 or 5 million. I'm not sure how many of those were the people with the pink pussy hats.
Agreed.
Right.
I just mean,
but a lot of people have been red-pilled. That
exactly
goes without saying.
I have friends who, one guy I knew filmed himself dropping his mail-in ballot to vote for Biden, saying, "I'm doing my part." He's a Trump voter now.
Wow.
Well, a lot of these, my neighborhood in Chicago, which is Chicago, turned red. So if you look at the map from 2020 to 2024, you can see a major red shift in the working class areas of Chicago.
Can I ask you a favor?
Sure.
Can we stop calling our party red and theirs blue
Because the red of the communists.
in every nation of the world?
Yeah.
And that decision to flip the colors was taken 12 years ago.
Right.
So can we flip it back, please, guys?
The blue is the
The conservatives have always been blue.
Right.
Always.
Well,
and the left has always been in red.
Was it like 92 when the TV stations inverted the colors?
It was more recent than that. It was that cable guy who died very young. What was his name? Meet the Press or whatever. And he just said, oh, well, this year we're going to flip the colors because reasons. And then it stuck. And I'd like us to flip it back for real reasons.
We'll have to. I mean, this is the game of the media.
Yeah.
And
But don't we own the media now? Do you look at the viewing figures for CNN?
oh, I know.
It's like, I mean, I had on my radio show 3.5 million listeners a day. CNN doesn't get a fraction of that in prime time.
Well,
prime time.
let alone key demo.
Yeah,
which
key
is
demo.
where,
Right.
Fox News is, I believe they get 500 to 600 prime time in the key demo.
Mm-hmm.
Millions older than that. So I do have a concern that there's pros and there's cons. MSNBC and CNN have no influence in the younger generation. Fox News still does to a profitable degree. But a lot of the new media platforms, I don't know if new media, but just modern media, we can call it, have footholds in new media. But what I've been warning this right or this coalition, I hate to say right and left because it doesn't really align up. It's more of the pro-America.
It's patriots versus those who hate America.
Yeah.
It's really that simple.
Or the cult. Because
The cult, I like that.
Well, because their ideas don't make sense.
Yeah.
It's just whatever is in alignment with their social order. But my concern is after this election, they call it the podcast presidency, the idea that these powerful liberal mechanisms would just abandon media is silly.
Yeah.
They're already starting to invest heavily in podcasts to try and get into space.
Right.
They do have a disadvantage in that when you're a liar, you have a hard time building audience, but they still have money.
But doesn't money matter? I mean, you look at Joe Rogan, you look at Dan Bongino. Why do people like yourself get popular? It's not because, I mean, look at Joe's production quality. A guy at a table, right, smoking cigars. I mean, it's not because of investment he is where he is today, right? So money can get you a lot, but can it really be the answer? I'm not so sure. It's authenticity.
I agree, but it is still a weapon in a sense.
Yes.
So look, they give Rachel Maddow $30 million. I think
That is mind-blowing.
and her ratings are what, like 50,000 in the key demo. Sooner or later, they're going to say, how about we give $10 million to some young millennial liberal and put $20 million in advertising for his show? Because what happens is for bookings of big guests, typically all that matters is the booking agent says, how many subscribers and views do you get?
Yep.
This means that for prominent celebrities, musicians, and even to a certain extent, some political personalities, they're going to turn down smaller shows and choose fake shows.
Right.
And the risk there is, I believe one of the most important things that happened in the past, in this election was that Trump won the popular vote.
Yes.
It sent a message to these squishy default libs that they were on the wrong side of history. What do you end up seeing? Bill Maher, Charlemagne the God as two examples, all of a sudden saying, you know what, maybe I was wrong about this guy to a certain degree, and trying to walk back because...
But that's all tactical. Cuomo, Maher is totally tactical.
They don't want to go off the edge.
Right.
But what happens if someone dumps $30 million into paid positions, and you'll get someone who's not particularly authentic, but they're hitting $2 million an episode, and then these politicians or these squishy default libs say, that show is much bigger, that's the default reality I want to be in.
But doesn't content matter?
Of course.
Because if they're talking about, a man can be a woman and borders don't matter, does the advertising negate that?
Limited. So this is why Trump had to win the popular vote and why it's so amazing that he did.
Yeah.
Because when you see these squishy default libs switch their positions, it shows you they never actually believed it.
Right.
They thought it was popular.
Yes.
And one thing that these individuals fear most is being on the wrong side of history. The propaganda machine, the media apparatus wants to create the narrative that they represent popular ideas when they're what, 10%, if that.
Correct.
That is the fear. So interestingly, just the other night we had a female journalist from Brooklyn on the show, and could you believe it? When I was talking about failures in the media, and I brought up the very fine people hoax, she asked me what that was. And I said that they lied and claimed Trump called Nazis very fine people. And she said, well, yeah, he said there's very fine people on both sides. Everyone in the room paused and just looked and said, are you being serious? She didn't know.
That's incredible.
I wouldn't call her a bad person. She just genuinely still did not know. So I'm very confident that our media side is going to ultimately prevail.
And also there's the demographic trends. I mean, if you look at young men especially, they've had it. Or surprisingly, after 20 years of being told you're bad, they say, okay, well, I don't think I'm bad, so I'm going to vote for President Trump who believes in America. Now, with women, it's different. Young women, it's catastrophic in terms of their proclivities and politically where they're heading.
Well, why is it?
I think it's group dynamics. I think it's group dynamics. Wanting to belong, as you said, wanting to be accepted. I think that's what it's about. And of course, the emotional aspect. You want to be seen as caring.
Yeah. I do think there's a big component in the last 40 years. The narrative, the societal narrative has been that women should be like men.
Yeah.
So adopting the masculine persona, working, being a CEO. And that's not to say that they can't, but that it is the masculine role, is the traditional historical masculine role, whether they, I know that pisses feminists off when I say that, but that's what men did. Men would work, men would run systems, and women would raise families and create people. And we always deeply respected the roles that each faced. Now, though, you see a lot of stories of young women who want jobs and they want to be bosses. And they're effectively adopting masculine roles, which they're at a disadvantage at against guys. And at the same time, this is resulting in a lower fertility rate, which I also believe results in the group dynamics you mentioned, and then young men breaking away and saying, I'm having enough of this. I guess the question is, if young men are breaking away, but do you think young women will eventually shift backwards towards traditional values, or what happens?
Well, I think it's a function of the kinds of things that you do. I mean, look, Andrew Klavan, my buddy, has said for years, feminism is a war on women, because what are you doing? You're negating the feminine.
Yep.
If you want to be like a guy, then what is a woman? Well, you get to the end point where there is no content to being a woman, right? Because a guy can be a woman, put on a leotard, and then suddenly he's, magically made himself one. So where does it end up eventually? Look, at the end of the day, what is life about? It's about meaning. Right? When enough women realize pretending to be a guy doesn't really give me meaning, then there's that moment of soul searching.
I wonder what's going to happen. One of the ideas I had is that young women are going to struggle to find partners, spouses. A lot of these guys, I believe among millennials, 55% of males are Republican, 45% are Democrat, but with women, it's 70% Democrat. And it's only going to get worse. It's going to get more pronounced as Gen Z gets older.
But there's also a counterbalance, and don't forget what you're going to say. Where are you seeing conversions to traditional religion, especially Catholicism? A lot of women are leading the way, women in their 30s, late 30s, who said, this just didn't work out for me. And I'm finding meaning in what? Motherhood, in faith. So sorry. I mean, I think there are some,
You're right.
I think there's some interesting things happening already as a counterbalance.
This is interesting. It is a very broad conversation, and I feel like I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk to you about what you're doing here. So, is there more you can tell us on a day-to-day what it means to do counter-terror? Are these plans to stop the bad guys?
So the biggest thing we did, and this was day 8 of the administration, and I can talk about this now because it's appeared in the Daily Mail and elsewhere. So I traveled the inter-agent. I hate that phrase. I traveled U.S. government. I spoke to SOCOM, to intelligence community, DOD, and they basically said one message to me. We've been watching the bad guys for 4 years, and the White House basically didn't let us kill them. And I thought, well, that's no good, because I've been briefed, and there's more bad guys. If you look at the surrender of Afghanistan, you look at ISIS in Africa, you look at the cartels, there's more bad guys. So day 8 of the administration, Mike Waltz, first ever Green Beret to be a national security advisor, and I and one of my team members walk into the Oval with a big map and a certain piece of intelligence, and we showed the president, sir, there is this cave complex in northern Somalia that ISIS has turned into a terror headquarters to train and prepare attacks against US citizens here and elsewhere. And we've been watching it for 2 years, and we'd like to kill this guy. And the president looked up from the Resolute desk and said, what do you mean we've been watching him for 2 years? I said, yes, under Biden, well, guys have just been watching. He said, kill them and kill them now.
Wow.
So he got out his iconic Sharpie. He ticked the go box on the operational orders. We took him out of the Oval. My guy called up Delta and various aspects of the military. The green light was given. Less than 30 hours later, I'm on Saturday morning under the West Wing in the Situation Room with the National Security Advisor, with my team, with all the screens live, like we're in some Jason Bourne movie, watching this ISIS leader in Somalia being turned into red mist by one of our platforms. And then 2 hours later, the president tweets out this iconic video that we turned into the motto for our team. It's on our lanyards, actually. I'll share this with you. I won't show you. This is the acronym of the Counterterrorism Division. It's from the president's tweet. We will find you and we will kill you. So if you want to ask what we do, that's what we do. If you're threatening Americans, we're not going to watch you anymore. We're going to take you out. If you're threatening international trade, the U.S. economy, by firing missiles on U.S. ships off the coast of Yemen, we're going to get serious with the Houthis. And with regards to the domestic threat, God bless Stephen Miller, Governor Noem, Tom Homan, we're going to find you and we're going to get you out of America.
Well, the concern with Yemen in particular, one, is there's anti-intervention is largely popular among Trump's base, especially the smaller faction of libertarians that voted for him. I tend to be more, why are we involved in these other countries? I certainly understand Yemen with Houthis firing on U.S. cargo ships and our NRLs and things like that. But I don't know, something feels off in, we've not declared war. We're all over the world. We're bombing these targets. The American people largely don't know about it. I suppose, what's your view in that regard, and what is the risk to these groups existing?
Yeah.
There's obvious that we've discussed, but, in your words, I suppose.
So first things first, isolationism never worked. It didn't work in 1941. It didn't work on 9/11. So the idea that we can just ignore the rest of the world in the age of the internet and transatlantic flight is impossible. Nevertheless, it is really crucial to understand who this president is. This is a non-interventionist president. One of the reasons he won 8 years ago was, remember his phrase, no more stupid wars, no more forever wars. And you've seen him keep to that promise. Yemen isn't another new war because the president has been very clear. We are on a ticking clock here, and we're going to affect freedom of maritime transit through that strait and up through the Suez Canal. We're not going to be here for years. We're going to deal a deadly blow to this organization. My metric from the Counterterrorism Directorate is very clear, and I say this to everybody across government. When I look at a piece of dirt anywhere in the world, as the president's deputy, I only care about one thing and one thing alone. Is that piece of real estate, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Yemen, whether it's anywhere, is it being used to plot mass casualty attacks against U.S. citizens back home or anywhere else around the world? It's called X-Ops. It's called the X-Ops metric. Are X-Ops being planned from that piece of real estate? And beyond that, there's a reason in my skiff I have a massive poster of the Twin Towers behind my desk, because that's the only question that matters. Are we preventing the next 9/11? But it's not with wars. It's not with regime change, because the president isn't into regime change, because he's right, because that's insanity. It's about putting these threat groups back into a box.
I think I accept it. With 9/11, with the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, the question was, why are we regime changing these countries?
Totally.
And Congressman Ron Paul said something to the effect of, we should be issuing letters of marque, targeting specific groups, not going to war in these countries. So limited conflict against specific terror organizations, I understand. But should there be like a letter of marque, at least some kind of formal declaration against, this is the target, this is the group, it is formalized, we're going in?
So it's a very attractive concept, letters of marque. How you update it for the 21st century is another question. However, I'm not going to do anything more than say, with regards to focusing on threat groups, as opposed to long-term regional engagements, I'm holding the pen right now on the president's U.S. counterterrorism strategy, so I think you will be well pleased with what comes out of that.
It is interesting. People were calling it a secret war in Yemen 15 years ago. So is this the strategy right now? I think you've already said it, but it's secure the effectively maritime through the Suez, stop the Houthis from
international shipping. That's all. I mean, think about these statistics. We have had 147 strikes against U.S. ships in that strait in the last 18 months. 147. A U.S. ship has not been able to pass through that passage unmolested without being fired upon with cruise missiles, with UAVs for 18 months. And the president looks at that and he gets incensed because that's about the U.S. economy. To go around the Cape of Africa, it's about everything. It's about Suez. What's the statistic? Tens of thousands of people died building the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
And we can't use it because a bunch of former charcoal smugglers backed by Iran are launching ICBMs against our ships. That will not be allowed to obtain. End of story.
Well, so just, I guess, one last question.
Yeah.
Considering Iran's involvement in things like this, there is a fear that we'll get dragged into a war with Iran. Do you think that's going to happen?
I don't think, look, the president's very clear, and pay attention, almost every press spray he does, whether he's talking about Easter, whether he's talking about somebody being sworn in, sooner or later he comes back to Iran. Why? If you scratch all of these groups, even the Sunni groups like Hamas, like Hezbollah, and the Shia groups like the Houthis, sooner or later you find what? Iran is behind them. How do a bunch of, basic low-level terrorists get access to rockets, ICBMs, and UAVs? Because they're getting them from Iran.
Right.
So Iran is the primary sponsor of international terrorism. But President Trump does not want a war with Iran. Look, and I'm going to talk from my perspective as a child of those who escaped a dictatorship. I am the child of real refugees. I would like the people of Persia, the Persians and the minorities, to take back their country, right? Like Hungarians did in 1989, like, the peoples of the Soviet Union did. We are not going to do regime change, but I'll tell you one thing for sure that I know from the president. We will not allow the greatest state sponsor of terrorism since 1979 to acquire weapons of mass destruction in terms of nuclear weapons. We know they want them, and if they get them, then the whole geopolitical reality changes.
I think the tough thing is people get real emotional over all this stuff. And if you try to sit down and look at it like a chessboard and just think about it, sometimes it's a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, look,
it's
not about solutions. Geopolitics is about managing threats, right? Bill Clinton, after he left office, gave a very famous speech in the UK where he said, "We will end terrorism." And I thought, you putz. You're saying we will end terrorism is like saying, I'm going to end prostitution. Good luck, dude. I mean, it's like saying, I'm going to end theft. As long as there's human society, we will have violence, we will have theft. For me, counterterrorism is threat management. We use the most powerful nation in the world to put these threat groups back into a box where they're not killing 3,000 Americans on one Tuesday morning in Manhattan. That's what I'm about. And that's not about regime change. It's about using what we call exquisite platforms to make it impossible for them to kill Americans.
Well, all right. Thanks for hanging out, Sebastian.
God bless.
Gorka.
Thank you, buddy.
Amazing. Really do appreciate it. Yeah, this was fun.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, that was great. What? Oh, Mike. Oh, my goodness. Hi, guys. Thanks for watching that interview. I thought it was really fascinating. I hope that you guys did too. I love seeing Tim sit down with some of these high-level officials and really get the skinny on what's going on. We just have a few minutes left, but there are a few more things that I wanted to touch on. One of the key things is this story from the Post Millennial, written by our own Tommy Stevenson. And this says Venezuela is likely weaponizing Tren de Aragua migration against the U.S. And this is from a report from the FBI. The FBI has determined that in the next 6 to 18 months, the Venezuelan government will try to use the members of TDA in the U.S. to threaten, kidnap, and kill U.S.-based Venezuelans critical of the Maduro regime. I don't think this necessarily comes as a surprise to anybody who's been following along and reading independent media, but it will likely be a surprise to people on the left who have repeatedly denied the notion that foreign governments are doing things like emptying their prisons and mental institutions and sending criminals to the U.S., which is something that Trump has been saying for a while. According to the FBI assesses that some Venezuelan government officials are likely using Tren de Aragua members as proxies for the Maduro regime in an effort to destabilize Chile, Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, and the United States. The official said that the FBI assesses that this demonstrates Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's willingness to violate the territorial sovereignty of Venezuela's neighbors to advance his regime's policies. I was listening to a podcast this morning about immigration, and I learned some new things that I thought you guys might be interested in, and maybe you already know. But it turns out that this would not be the first time that foreign governments have been weaponizing migration against the United States and using criminals, getting rid of criminals and sending them to the United States illegally. So the Mariel boat lift, which was facilitated by Fidel Castro, where a bunch of Cubans, I think it was 125,000, came to the U.S. under the Carter administration. What Castro did was he basically said a bunch of criminals can go. He opened up the prisons and he said, go for it. And then Jimmy Carter was saddled with 125,000 people. He had to figure out what to do with them. 125,000 seems like a really tiny number when you look at the numbers that we've been dealing with over the past 4 years and, even going further back. But he had to figure out how to deal with that. And some people say that it really cost him the election against Reagan, in addition to the Iran hostage crisis. Interesting that these problems just continue. They don't necessarily go away. And he was really lenient with the migrants. He embraced everybody. He brought them in. There's been a lot of great Cubans in American history, but that's kind of, not the point. The point is this has been happening for a while. Under Carter also, China apparently threatened to send more migrants to the U.S. when Carter said, we can't do business with China because of their horrifying human rights violations. Apparently, Chinese leadership at the time said, how many people do you want us to send? And that shut Carter up, and he stopped complaining about their human rights abuses. So this is definitely not the first time. And this is something that definitely has been ongoing for the past 4 years. The FBI, said also, these findings should shock Americans, but not the law enforcement community. They reflect the sentiments and numerous other intelligence assessments across multiple agencies. Maduro is a Marxist dictator who hijacked a once prosperous Venezuela, which we know is very oil rich, and brought in nothing but total economic collapse and gang takeover. He crumbled Caracas, now overrun with drugs and violence, and wants to do the same across the United States by sending his most violent and dangerous criminals into our communities. Someone from the Office of DNI said, this information and intelligence are the most robust and accurate given their focus on domestic security and crimes versus limited intelligence assessments from other intelligence elements who by law focus solely on foreign intelligence collection and who until President Trump took office had very little resources focused on TDA. So TDA has been a problem in the U.S., and now we have judges who don't want us to deport members of this gang. TDA was the one that had the gang takeover of the apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado. TDA also has been threatening people in Utah, which is something that Tommy, who works with Post Millennial, has been researching for a while. And just, across the board, we have so many people in from these different gangs. And I really commend the Trump administration for trying to remove these people. The whole situation in Texas with the more than 50 Venezuelans that the Trump administration was attempting to deport before the ACLU filed their case with 3 different courts. And the Supreme Court ruled that no one else could be deported without explicit order from the Supreme Court, despite their not having jurisdiction because the case was also in 2 lower courts. That's just totally insane. So, I think that it's good that we have this FBI report out. And I certainly hope that law enforcement will take notice of this and will, start working. The places that are sanctuary cities will actually start working with ICE to get people out of the country. There's no reason that we should have people here. And Trump was right when he said that we have people coming into the country who are criminals from other places. And what happens is once you have people coming into the country who show up at the border and claim asylum and don't really have any records, because of course you can just chuck your records by the side of the road, there's no real way to vet these people, and there's no real way to figure out where it is that they have come from or to assess whether or not their asylum claim has any kind of legitimacy. So, we'll see what happens there. As far as Iran, which we were just covering with Gorka and Tim, this came out from John Levine at the Washington Free Beacon. Fetterman, unlike Gorka, does seem interested in having some kind of war. And he said, you're never going to be able to negotiate with that kind of regime. And that has been destabilizing the region for decades already. And now we have an incredible window, I believe, to do that, to strike and destroy Iran's nuclear facilities. We already saw that Trump had decided to have talks instead of just outright bombing Iran, which is what Israel had suggested happens. But yeah, we definitely have these two forces competing in the federal government right now. Those who think that we should be essentially bombing Iran and destroying their nuclear facilities, and those who don't. I wonder, when you look at this and we have these foreign entanglements that have been going on for so long, and you have a president who says, no more of this. We don't want any wars. We don't want to kill people. We don't want to get killed. We don't want any of that. You start to think about Michael Corleone in The Godfather, and how he kept trying to get out and they just kept pulling him back in. I wonder how this is going to play out. Fetterman said that he was talking about the Houthis. He said, and remember, all of these so-called experts were wrong. They've been saying for years and years, Hezbollah was the ultimate badass. Can I say that? Yeah, the ultimate badass that kept Israel in check. And we can't move on anything beyond that. He said they couldn't fight for, crap. And Hamas literally are just a bunch of tunnel rats with junky rockets in the back of a Toyota truck. And now the Houthis have been effectively neutered as well. So what's left? You have Iran, and they have a nuclear facility, and it's clearly only for weapons. As it stands right now, I think Iran is able to import enriched uranium that's enriched up to 3.5%, I think is what it is. So, the idea is to prevent them from making it and prevent them from importing more highly enriched uranium that could be used for weapons. Iran has been behind the Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas. So, yeah, it's really a fascinating time to watch all of this happen. If the stakes weren't so high, it would almost be entertaining. And with that, we're going to throw to Russell Brand, right? Is that what we're doing, Kellen? We throw to Russell Brand?
Yeah, I'll get that set up. Just
okay,
if you want to read a couple chats.
Oh, I can read a couple chats. That's fun. Let's see. What are we talking about? Fetterman is too lockstep with Netanyahu. While he is a big Israel supporter, watch your language, Libby. I know. Listen, I'm trying. It's not me. It's Fetterman. Blame the senator from Pennsylvania. Hamas owns Palestine. Well, sure. Let's see. Don't need a blue chew when you got a Libby, Italian queen. I have no idea what that means. But this is my oyster blue dress, and I just got it, and I like it. I think it's a good new color for me. But Kellen's laughing, so he gets it. I have no idea what you guys are talking about. Someone doesn't like my dress, thinks I should wear different dresses. Okay, here's one. Everyone hates the USA. We only deal with levels of hate. Freedoms scare dictators, kings, and religious leaders. I can't even read the thing. Let me take off my glasses. MRNVNDMM says, yeah, people really do hate us. The rest of the world hates us. Our allies mostly hate us, It's a tough place to be king of the world. And yet here we are. We're at the top of the pyramid. Everybody looks up and knows what's going on with us. And we don't necessarily know what's going on with anybody else. Someone else said, this is fantastic. Great. I think so, too. I think that was a terrific interview. I love seeing that stuff. Weapons grade uranium is 99%, so they're real close. It is a low amount that they're allowed to import. I presume Obama was originally behind setting up the Houthis. I don't know what that means, but also you spelled Obama wrong. Half our own nation hates us. Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem too. I understand it is still early, but when do we start worrying if we still don't see arrests and accountability? Well, that's a thing too. We had a situation in LA this week where a guy who had been driving drunk, had previous deportations and previous convictions, was driving drunk, killed 2 teenagers, ended up in prison, sentenced to 10 years. They were going to let him out 6.5 years early. Tom Homan was like, absolutely not. We're going to put a detainer on him from ICE. The U.S. attorney got involved for L.A. And now Gavin Newsom said that he would work with ICE to make sure the guy who drove drunk and killed teenagers gets out of the country. So I think that probably means Gavin Newsom's running for president. But also, I think that's a start, right? I mean, that's one guy, but that's a start.
So the raid has been launched. Shout out Russell
Okay.
Brand. Libby, if you want to tell everyone where they can find you.
Oh, you can find me. You can find me on Twitter. I'm dead naming Twitter. Libby Emmons, at Libby Emmons on Twitter. You can check out everything we're doing at thepostmillennial.com and humanevents.com. Thanks for hanging out.